Hello friends, this is Insomnia to Peace. I'm John the Sleep Coach. In today's video, we're going to be doing the first of many client success stories in which we go over and interview clients that I've worked with personally and get their insights for what insomnia looked like for them, how they overcame it, and see what other insights they might be able to share that might be able to help out other people that are in the middle of struggling with insomnia. Today's a very special episode on top of that because not only is it the first client success story, but the woman that I'm interviewing, Charlie, was also the first client that I had met and worked with. And client, I really enjoyed my talk with Charlie. She had a lot of interesting things to say. She had a lot of helpful things to say, things that I think that a lot of people who are in the middle of struggling with insomnia could really stand to benefit from. So I'm really excited to get her story out here. And yeah, so without further ado, here's my talk with Charlie. Charlie, welcome. Good to meet you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Welcome to the program, and thanks for coming on and being the very first insomnia success story that we've got over at Insomnia to Peace. And not only were you the first, are you the first success story, but you're also my very first client.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome. I didn't know that. Well, I'm really happy to be here as a success story. So that's great to me.
yeah. So I figured if we could get into this by maybe you telling us a bit about your backstory, how you first developed insomnia, how we came into contact, and all that good stuff.
Of course, yeah. So I'm 35. I live in the UK. You can probably guess I'm not American with my accent. And I was having a really difficult time physically and mentally in August of this year. So this is December. We're talking about 4 months ago.
Hmm.
Um, Work has been really difficult for me this year. I knew I was under a lot of stress and I wasn't coping with it very well at all. I then got quite unwell physically, and I didn't feel I could take time off from my job to recover. My job's the sort where if the work doesn't get done by one person, it has to be picked up by somebody else, and I felt really guilty about that. So I never really gave myself the time off I needed to recover from the physical illness, and unsurprisingly, I wasn't recovering very quickly. I ended up with lots of different issues going on where one illness turned into another or it became prolonged, and I ended up being on all sorts of different medications for infections, and I started worrying about what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I getting better? Is there something seriously wrong with me? I'd been to all sorts of different doctors and none of them were quite sure what was going on with me. And I remember just one night I convinced myself that there's something really wrong with me, seriously, what
Hmm.
wrong with me. And I've always had difficulties with anxiety, but I've never had it cause me to lose sleep. I've had anxiety that's led to sleeplessness over things like, an exam or something, like a blood test, which I really don't like. But just simply thinking about things, worrying about things in my head has never, ever impacted my sleep before. If anything, I was the sort of person that, oh, I'm getting a bit anxious, I'm getting a bit stressed. I'm going to go have a nap, just to shut my brain off for a couple of hours. Um, so I was very confused that night as to why can't I sleep? Why am I lying here, not able to stop worrying about whether I have some sort of serious illness or not? On the basis of, just worries. There's no basis for me thinking that I had this illness. It was just I was very scared, I was very anxious, and I wasn't well.
Hmm.
And those thoughts never stopped all night, um, to the point where I remember seeing the sun come up through the window and being very confused and scared and sort of, well, it's 7 a.m. now. I haven't slept all night. There's no point. And I took myself straight to the emergency room. We call it A&E over here,
Hmm.
and said, I'm not well. I think I've got something seriously wrong with me. I didn't sleep at all last night, and I was in a complete state of panic. And I remember being calmed down by the doctors, and they said, just try and sleep tonight. I'm sure you're okay. We'll run some extra tests and see what's actually going on with you. And they were very reassuring about my physical health.
Hmm.
My mental health, they just said, oh, just try and sleep tonight. They weren't as reassuring as they could have been. Um, and eventually, I tried. to sleep when the sun went down. And I couldn't. I just remember thinking, I didn't sleep last night. How can I possibly sleep tonight? And I started convincing myself that, oh, I might be more likely to have a nightmare because I haven't slept. I might be more likely to experience sleep paralysis for the first time in my life because I didn't sleep last night. I was so worked up by the fact that I hadn't slept that night before because it was alien to me. It was so confusing. There's been nights where I've had difficult sleep, but never a night with zero, no sleep whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it was a traumatic experience to me. So I didn't sleep that night either. So then it's 2 nights in a row. 2 nights became 3 nights, and I took myself back to A&E,
Mm.
and they ended up giving me Valium because I was so completely terrified as to what was going on with me. I couldn't understand why couldn't I sleep, and I was having physical sensations when I tried to sleep as well. It felt like my head was pounding. It felt like someone was pushing me into my pillow at one point. When I'd start to sort of feel myself going to sleep, my whole body would jolt, and I couldn't understand what on earth was going on at all. And it was probably the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Um, as time went on, it didn't get any better. Um, to me, I still thought I was awake all night. I didn't understand what was going on with me, and my perception was I've been awake for about 4 days in a row. And in the end, um, I got so desperate that I was looking on Reddit, on Google, on anything to try to get some help of
Hmm.
why can't I sleep? What do I need to do to fix this? Because I had no idea what was happening to me. And unfortunately, when I went on Reddit, it wasn't very reassuring. It wasn't very helpful. It
You
was
don't
very
say.
negative. Yes. And that made me much worse, to the point where I actually ended up being treated as an outpatient, but treated nonetheless at a psychiatric facility, um, which was not something I ever thought would happen to me, but it did. Um, and that was about the time I met you. You reached out to me on Reddit because I think I'd posted something along the lines of it's impossible to get better, because of all these different studies I'd found online, and I'd
Mm.
convinced myself that basically I had brain damage, and that it was never ever possible for me to go back to sleeping the way I was. And I am, and previously had been, the sort of person who sleep is not difficult for me usually. I sleep heavily for a long time. Probably not the healthiest sleep, I've now come to realize, but 8, 9, 10 hours completely normal for me, and that was my understanding of sleep, my previous sleep habit. Um, so to go from sleep being that easy and that long to perceiving that I am awake all night is, uh, yeah, as I said earlier, it's traumatic. It is something that still stayed with me, even though I'm much further along in my recovery. And you and I started talking to each other on a weekly basis. Um, we then found out what paradoxical insomnia was, and we realized that that's what applied to me. I thought I'd been, surviving on 1, 2 hours sleep at best, with no perception that it had actually happened. And then we realized actually, I probably, although it wasn't, for very long periods of time, I probably was sleeping a lot more often than I thought. 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, and that would add up overnight. And sort of talking with you and realizing that that's actually a part of recovery. And even though I couldn't tell it was happening to me, I started getting my partner to reassure me because if I fell asleep, he would notice. And then I went from, oh, okay. Well, I am sleeping. Maybe I'm sleeping more than I think. Maybe it is possible for me to get some sleep again. And with his reassurance and with talking to you about the fact that recovery is possible, I slowly started believing that myself. And I then started to actually not just think, oh, well, I must have slept. I started to think, I think I have slept. Time seems to have passed a bit quicker than it should have done. And I wasn't looking at a clock, it was just my internal clock. I
Mm.
started thinking, I don't remember the last sort of half an hour or so. It feels like that amount of time has passed. Maybe I'll try and get some more sleep, and then I'd be asleep again, and I'd get that same feeling. And yeah, it was very broken, and I was waking up repeatedly through the night, but it was still a lot better than what I had been having, which to me felt like nothing.
Yeah.
Um, the physical sensations started going away, so that feeling of pressure in my head, of being pushed into my bed, the banging noise. Um, when I was at my worst, I actually heard a voice as I was falling asleep once, which was one of the reasons I ended up at the psychiatric facility because I thought I was hallucinating and hearing voices.
Hmm.
And I think you and I called them thinking dreams, didn't we? So the hospital explained that I was probably falling asleep, but I was so hyper aroused, so aware of the process of sleep that the dream began with me still half awake. And so that's how I heard the voices. But that absolutely terrified me. But the less I paid attention to them, the more I started to notice that they were going away, which
Hmm.
it seems a little paradoxical in itself, doesn't it? The less you think about it, the less you'll notice them. Um, but it's true. I haven't had anything like that happen to me since I would say September, October. Um, And then I noticed that the sensation of, oh, I have slept came back. And the periods between waking up got longer and longer. I'm not at the stage yet where I've gone to sleep and I've woke up with my alarm and it's, oh, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. But I think I've managed to go to sleep between about midnight and 7 a.m., consistently without waking up. So yeah, I'm almost back to what I was before. There's still a little bit of anxiety there, in terms of
Hmm.
worrying about the relapses. But I'd say I'm only 3 months into this process. So as good as that is, I still think that there's further that I can go, and I'm hopeful that I will. I don't really see any reason why I couldn't anymore. So the
Hmm.
fact that I have that hope and that sort of confidence in my own ability to sleep again, 4 months ago, back in August, there's no way I would have felt that.
Hmm.
I'm surprised that I do. Um, Looking back at some of the things I was saying on Reddit, I was clearly sleep deprived. I was clearly panicking. None of it really made much sense. But
Yeah.
then again, that entire forum doesn't really make much sense when you look at it when you're not sleepy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like there's so many things that resonate to me regarding your own story. Not only if it doesn't resonate with me on a personal level from my due to my own struggles with insomnia, but also the other people that I coach and help out with. It's just going in order from the your story. The fact that you slept great and then suddenly something happened,
Mm.
some strange thing, some stressful thing happened, and then suddenly, bam, you just
Yeah,
went to this awful, awful period. And the fact that the tricky thing, I mean, it can happen for a lot of different reasons. For me, it was because I was starting a new job. But for it can happen because you're moving across the country, you have an exam the next day. But the tricky thing with medical related stuff is that most people, don't have a doctor's level of understanding of the body, or even if they did, they may think, man, okay, I have some scary medical thing happening, and maybe that is actually interfering with my body's ability to sleep. And then, like,
mm,
especially, I mean, because this is something that's very strange, like for it to suddenly come out about so seriously, and I'm experiencing these other medical symptoms. So that it ultimately is insomnia, anxiety bullshit, which ultimately
mhm,
doesn't mean anything. But for people who don't know any better, it can be a very convincing story and reason for them to think, no, no, there is something legitimately very wrong with me. And since this is a medical issue, that must mean that there's a medical solution. So, okay, let's start the WebMD process.
yeah,
Let's start with the supplementation. Let's look at all the different drugs. Let's X, Y, and Z. And they think think that they're going about this the right way. I mean, it sounds like an intuitive problem-solving approach. This is how you solve every single other problem in your life, but it is the exact opposite thing that you want to do for
yeah.
insomnia. It just feeds it
Absolutely.
way too much. And the other thing that's very tricky with medical situation is I mean you got hit with a 1-2 punch where you had this issue and then you went to the ER the next day, and
Yeah.
for you to be I don't want to give off the impression that I'm anti-medicine or anti-doctor in any way, shape, or form, but a lot of people suffering from insomnia, they'll go to the doctors and they'll say, "Okay, I'm going to modern day medicine. You know, we've made a lot of advancements here. Surely they will have something for me."
Hmm.
And then ultimately, maybe they give you a prescription that gives you inconsistent success, but almost always it does people suffering from insomnia do not get the help or support that they need, so it's very demoralizing for them to go to the doctor, and then they just don't get the see the results that they want, so it's extremely demoralizing. And that was something that, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was a very overwhelming negative sense feeling for you as well.
Yes, it was. I didn't just go to A&E once. So I went to the emergency room on several occasions. They did give me medication because that was the best that they thought they could do. So I've had a lot of different medications over the past few months. The first one they gave me was something called Zopiclone in the UK. It probably has a different name over there.
Mhm.
But essentially, it is a sleeping pill. It's designed to knock you out. And I did take it one afternoon after we'd come back from the hospital, and it knocked me out for 2.5 hours. But the next time I took it didn't knock me out. And that was the first time I experienced those strange sort of banging noises in my
Mhm.
head. So I never took that again. No way I was
Yeah.
taking that for a second time. I was then put on something called metrazapine, which is an anti-anxiety medication, but also is a sedative. I was on that for about 3 days, but it made me feel drunk during the day. I felt like I was sort of sedated, hungover.
Mhm.
So while it helped a bit with the sleeping, it wasn't worth how I felt the next day. So I think I lasted about 2, 3 days on that. They also gave me something called lorazepam, which is very similar to Valium, to take at night to sleep. And that didn't help me sleep at all. It just sort of made me again feel sedated. The one thing I took for about a week that I did find helpful because it was at a much lower level was something called promethazine. And that is the same thing that they put in Night Nurse. I think it's called NyQuil over where you are.
Mhm.
And it doesn't put you to sleep, it just makes you drowsy. And that I think I took for about a week or so. And I did notice some benefits from that because it wasn't just okay, take it and it knocks you out. It helps your body sort of get ready for sleep. Um, but the problem with that was, although I found it worked, you can't stay on it forever. It loses its effectiveness. So that was the cruel part about it was okay, great. I've had a week of pretty good sleep, not as good as I am now, but back then it was comparatively quite good.
Sure.
I was still having the paradoxical insomnia, but I was being told by my partner that he noticed I'd been sleeping better on on the promethazine. So I was like, okay, well that's good then. Um, but then it started getting less effective. Um, and the hospital, because I was still under the treatment of the psychiatric unit at that point, said, all right, maybe try taking it every other day now instead of every day. And I just thought, well, if I need to come off this, I need to come off this. Giving it me every now and then is actually cruel. I'd rather just stop taking any sort of medication and try and beat this without any medication because then that way at least it's consistent and I'm sleeping on my own at that point and I don't need to worry about okay, I've had 2 3 months of sleeping well, but as soon as I take the tablets, I stop taking the tablets rather, I'll have a relapse. That just seemed even more scary to me.
Mm.
So I stopped taking them. I think I maybe used them once again, um, when I went back to work and I had a little bit of a trigger with you know oh, the stress of everything, which made me sick in the first place. But eventually I got, over that. I had a bit more time off work after that because I think it was a bit too early to go back to work. But I've been back at work for about 3 weeks now, and not any issues to report there. So
That's
yeah,
great.
I think I just needed a bit more time to get my sleep back naturally and sort of, I guess, believe that I can sleep even if I've got something to do the next day that isn't ideal. I can get to sleep. Some nights it might take a little bit longer than I would like, but it's still always under an hour. I'm not there tossing and turning like I had been before. It would just be sometimes I'd get into bed and, oh, I'm a bit nervous and I haven't been at work for a few days. I'm back there tomorrow. I need to go into the office. Or recently, Christmas, when we went to bed on Christmas Eve, I was sort of like, oh, I really hope I sleep tonight. I don't want to have a relapse because that'll spoil Christmas Day. Um, and yeah, it took me about half an hour that night to go to sleep, but I still did it.
Mm.
So it's all looking a lot more positive, and I'd like to think a year from now I won't even have those thoughts when I go to bed. It'll just be back to normal.
Mm.
Well, I hope it's much quicker than a year from now, but you know what I'm meaning.
Right, right, right.
I'll just look back at this as a memory and just think, oh yeah, that was rubbish. That was a really rubbish time.
Yeah. Yeah, so many, again, a lot of things about your success story stick out to me is especially for starters, you ran into it's the other dangerous thing about medication is that you start playing the game of, well, okay, now I can't take it every night, so maybe I should take it every other night. Or wait, maybe I should take 2 days of break in between. Maybe I should try upping the dose. Maybe I should supplement this drug with another drug. And then
Mm,
before you know it, you have this whole complicated super. Whereas, like, back in May, you put no thought or effort into this, and now you're in this
nope.
very scary trap of like, okay, well, and you know that a part of you knows that it's bullshit, that you're just playing this game of like, well, maybe I should do this and that, but then also you're very scared of weaning yourself off these drugs because that's almost certainly going to cause a relapse, and we certainly can't have any of that because that's the most horrifying thing possible.
Yep.
Um, so it's just, and it's on top of that, it's also just flat out the wrong tool for the job. The right tool is to identify that we've developed a fear of being awake at night and to just become
Hmm.
more comfortable with the fact that that sometimes we're awake at night and it's okay. It's nothing
Yeah.
we have to run away from. It's something that we can voluntarily face and just I don't even want to say make peace with. We just have to acknowledge that we are awake, and it might be, there are times that it might be uncomfortable, but it's not nearly as bad as what we thought it was originally.
No, and that was an important part for me was realizing that because when I was at my worst, I'd be lying in bed, I'd be able to feel my heart rate beating, I could hear myself breathing, and I was getting all those bizarre sensations in my body and in my head. Now, when I go to bed, I can get comfortable again. My heart rate isn't going crazy. I'm not hyperventilating. None of those things are happening to me. There's, as I say, a slight little voice there that's just like, I hope we don't have a relapse. That's still an ongoing thing, but I do think that will go away the more and more experience I get of sleeping, even when I've got something difficult to do, like a long road trip or
Sure.
a difficult day at work. Yeah, which was a trigger for one of my relapses. But yeah, 3 weeks going back to work now, going back in person to work now, none of that's caused me a sleepless night. So it does get there. I think you have to accept it's not going to be instant. There is no sort of like, oh, I'll just have perfect sleep tonight, forget everything
Mhm.
that's been happening over the last few months. It doesn't work that way. I don't know if it's because there's too much cortisol in your system or whether it just takes time to actually calm your body down. I don't really know, but it's not like you can just flick a light switch and just say, okay, I understand everything about sleep. I'll be fine tonight. It's scary, but that's just unfortunately the way it is. Um, and it was only through having more good nights that I started getting the ability to recognize I'd been asleep again then
Hmm.
feel that I had definitely been asleep and my sleep pattern became much more normal. Um, and now I'm quite happy with the sleep that I get. It's something that sleep deprivation is only a memory for me now.
Hmm.
I think I probably had some of the best sleep ever last night. I didn't actually get out of bed until 11 o'clock this morning, which is
There you
great
go.
because I wasn't up till 3 a.m. I wasn't tossing and turning and struggling. I went to bed around about midnight, I would say. We've been watching Squid Game, which, Squid Game
Yeah.
2 is very good. So we'd watched a couple of episodes of that. I realized it was midnight and just thought, yeah, I'm tired now. Let's go to bed. Um, and I think I maybe only woke up two, three times or something throughout that whole 11-hour period. That's not great. It's not healthy to do that either. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing, but it's the sort of thing I used to do before I got sick. So that was quite a nice feeling, even though I felt like I'd wasted half the day.
Honestly, I mean, I've had those moments of those days as well, and especially if you're recovering from insomnia, a part of me
Mm,
wants to almost encourage people to do that because they've had such a, you know, uh, traumatic and shitty experience with sleep. Just want to be like, just you've earned it. You've gone through
yeah.
this horrible traumatic thing. Who cares? Just sleep in, enjoy it.
Mm,
Yeah, the a couple of things to that I wanted to speak to is the going back to the paradoxical insomnia. You know,
yeah.
what really helps me, or what helped me personally, was I realized that I must have been sleeping at some points because I mean, if you're in bed for 7 hours, think about how long of a period that is. Like, if you were sitting down in a chair in the middle of the day for 7 hours, that would feel like it's forever. Now, compare
Mm,
that to when you're in that weird, back and forth sort of state of mind when you're in bed. It does feel long and does feel uncomfortable, but it's off. Your internal clock can't help but feel like, all right, okay, I know that I've been here for a set 6, 7 hours,
mm,
but it really doesn't feel like it.
yeah.
And just like even inviting people to just like, okay, just sit in a chair for like, really make a note of how long it is to sit in a chair for like, not even 7 hours, but 30 minutes or an hour. Now compare that to how you felt in bed. I mean, and you had the
Yeah.
benefits of having a partner who gave you that reassurance of, no, you were snoring like a baby, you were
Yeah.
asleep. Um, but for a lot of people but let's say for people who don't have a partner with them, they can at least, I like to give them that sort of like thought experiment to like help them realize it's like you are getting sleep, and maybe it doesn't feel like it's the best sleep, but it's reassuring to know that you're getting something. That it's not like you've gone weeks or months without getting any sort of like quality sleep, because your brain is getting your brain is most likely getting what it needs.
Yes.
Now, in order, maybe not enough to feel comfortable, but it's getting something, and that can provide a lot of reassurance for a lot of people who are struggling with insomnia.
It did with me because I genuinely thought I had lost the ability to sleep. I thought my brain's damaged. I've been awake for too long. That 4 days where I was completely awake and terrified has done something to a part of my brain that controls sleep, and I've ruined it for the rest of my life. That was my thought process.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, even when we discussed paradoxical insomnia and what it was, I didn't believe it. When my partner would try to reassure me that I'd been sleeping, I thought he was just sort of saying to me what he thought I wanted to hear. I didn't think it was true. Because you don't, when you're in the middle of a really severe period of insomnia, you think I haven't felt myself sleep, so therefore I haven't been asleep. I've been tossing and turning all night. It's not possible that I slept. You are adamant about it. You refuse to believe it at first. Or at least certainly that was my experience. And it took a very long time for me to even think that it was possible that I was sleeping and that my partner wasn't lying to me just to try and make me feel better. Because if I feel better, then maybe I'll start sleeping. That's what I thought he was trying to do. But it it did, as I say, after a while, I started to believe it myself, and it went from I've definitely not slept to I might have slept because I've been here a while, and then might have was, oh, I think I've slept. I'd wake up after about 45 minutes, and I'd be like, I don't remember what I was thinking about. The period of time has passed. My thoughts are quiet, whereas they were so noisy when I was in bed, when we first got in bed, and that was the sort of thing that made me think, okay, if things are quiet and I don't remember what my last thought was, maybe I've slept, because it's a very strange thing when you have paradoxical insomnia, because when you do wake up, you are so awake. It's like your body's stuck in this fight or flight scenario, and you are so awake. It's like you've never been to sleep at all, and that's why you believe you haven't, or at least that's the way it felt to me.
Hmm.
Um, so then you just sort of have to calm yourself down a little bit and just think, all right, yeah, I am wide awake, as if, I've had far too much coffee. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't remember the last sort of, and I'm not saying look at a phone or a clock or anything like that, but I just don't remember the last sort of half an hour or so. That memory is not there. It's missing. And
Mhm.
then you sort of think, okay, well, maybe that's sleep then. And then the next stage was believing that that was sleep. And then the period where I was sleeping got longer and deeper. So that then when I did wake up, after it'd be, instead of 20, 30 minutes, it'd be 2, 3 hours. And then I'd be like, oh, yeah, no, I've definitely been asleep. I feel slightly groggy, I feel different.
Yeah.
And then I started having dreams again. And then I knew once I was having dreams, like, proper dreams, not just little snippets of dreams.
Yep.
But then I was sort of like, okay, well, if I've had a dream, I must be asleep.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't suddenly, I think it was like a dream where I moved house and went back to like my childhood house or something. And I just remember sort of lying in bed being like, well, I definitely didn't just move house, so I must have been asleep. And it was those sort of little things that just built up my confidence as I went along, and I started thinking, right, okay, all right, sleep is happening. And the difficulty I then had was once I got that sleep back, I became very protective of it, didn't I? And I refused to sort of do anything the next day. So I was, because I was getting treatment from the psychiatric place, I was off work. I was medically unfit for work, and I had a doctor's note saying that. So I didn't have to worry about work. But once I started sleeping, what I worried about was anything taking it away from me. So
Hmm.
I think one of the first conversations we had was, we had some workmen coming to repair our kitchen worktops, and I remember saying to you, like, I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight because I need to be awake at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and I don't think I can sleep for that reason. And I remember that was one of my first sort of successes, wasn't it? Because I did sleep that night. It was still broken, it wasn't perfect, but I was not horrendously sleep deprived and tossing and turning all night, and that didn't happen. And I think that probably was my first success. Yeah, I don't remember a bigger one than that. It's not sticking in my mind anyway. And then there was more things from that I had to start learning. So, yeah, I can go back to work. I can sleep and go back to work. I can drive because I stopped driving for a long time because I was so tired, so anxious. I didn't feel
Hmm.
safe on the road.
Right.
Um, so I started driving again, even though it was just little journeys, to the pharmacy, to the doctors, to the hospital, all of which are very, very close to where I live. So it'd be a 10-minute drive here and there. And now I'm back to, driving on motorways if I need to for several hours. So
That's great.
yeah, it took a while, but I did it.
Yeah. It was something that stood out to me. One of the things that stood out to me just now was when you said that you you started to see little bit by bit progress because you had personally experienced maybe some like smaller successes where it's like, okay, well, like the amount of time from where you thought you were asleep to like it went from I think I was asleep for 20 minutes,
Hmm.
maybe now it seemed to stretch out to 2 hours. And And then slowly but surely, everything started to unravel. Sometimes I think of insomnia as like this very tightly bound knot, and there's so many reasons why it's not getting unraveled. You know, we're doing these protective behaviors where we
Yeah.
have this very unhealthy mindset. We're chasing sleep, and we're trying to we have this massive fear in our lives. But then slowly, as we start to adopt these better practices and start going back to our life and the life that we want to live, then everything slowly starts to unravel. And then, weirdly enough, usually we start to see it's not uncommon to see success ramp up really quickly. So, for example, and it work success can come quickly for a lot of different reasons. It's sort of like two sides of the same coin. But not only are you, are you seeing success because you're applying all this correct outlook and approach to insomnia, but also
Yeah.
you're actually starting to see success, and because you're starting to see success, you're starting to feel better and better, and
Mm.
you're naturally feeling more relaxed. And now that you're more relaxed, and you feel better, you can apply those lessons easier and easier. So it's this very positive and comforting feedback loop. And then yeah, it's that's one of the few good things about insomnia, is that how quickly recovery can happen, assuming that you start to face it the correct way.
Oh, definitely. I think I would be much, much worse if I hadn't started, talking with you and trying to change my mindset. I probably would still be, looking on Reddit for answers as to what's wrong with me. I'd probably still be taking medication from the hospital. Certainly wouldn't have been discharged as quickly as I was from the hospital. I think I only was there maybe about 5 weeks in total. There was two periods where I got discharged a little bit too quickly the first time, but yeah, I think I only had to work with them for about maybe 5 or 6 weeks in total, which, given how severe my anxiety was, and there was, one time I was telling you I was having some thoughts that I didn't want to continue with my life the way that it was. That's how upset this insomnia was making me.
Mhm.
Um, for me to turn that around and be discharged from their care as quickly as I was is it demonstrative of how much my sleep started to improve when I started dealing with it in a better way. Um, and it's scary. It's hard to do that because the idea of how can I possibly be happy with being awake at night? The only thing I want to do is sleep. I do not want to be sitting around trying to enjoy myself at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm not enjoying myself. I just want to sleep because I'm so sleep deprived. I feel sick. All of those things. It's very hard to find positives in that sort of scenario. But you don't have to immediately go from, okay, I'm terrified, I've been awake all night and I think my life is over, to, okay, I'll just stay awake tonight. That's not how it works. That's not possible. Um, it's more about turning down the fear slowly. And that's, I think, why it takes some time to recover from this. So you go from, oh, everything's awful, I can't possibly sleep, to, oh, maybe someone's telling me I am sleeping. All right, maybe I'm having this awful, terrible, broken 20 minutes sleep here or there. And then that sort of goes to the back of your head as, all right, okay, so it's not total loss of sleep anymore. Now it's just crap, broken sleep. And I hate that too. And then it goes from there to, all right, I'm having broken sleep, but it's at least a few hours. And then that sort of the fear and the anger and all of the confusion start to get less and less as you go along. And every time you sort of, I called it surprising myself. So the more I started to recover, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have the perception that I was waking up. That was the first thing that was great. Um, but then I'd start doing that for longer periods. I'd be awake less at night. I'd find it quicker to go to sleep at night. And then I'd be able to start doing that even if I had something to do the next day. So even if it was, okay, I've got to drive the next day, I still slept. Um, it took a while until I was ready to do it, for work or anything a bit more serious than that. But I kept having these little surprises along the way that sort of built up this kind of confidence of, okay, I can sleep. My brain isn't broken.
Hmm.
Um, and the more I started feeling that way, the less the fear would keep me awake. Um, the fear is still, something that I have, but it's not a fear of being awake. It's a fear of going back to how I used to be that is present now. So it's the worry of having a relapse, but not just a few hours struggling at night. I have occasionally had that when I've got something big the next day. For example, like when I had to drive up north to go and visit my family about a month ago. Yeah, I think it took me a couple of hours to go to sleep that night because it was a really big deal for me to do this road trip, but that was about a month ago.
That was
But I got,
me bringing
yeah,
it.
yeah, that was a big test for me. I remember we discussed it, weeks beforehand. I was saying how nervous I was and how important it was that I slept. And yeah, that did affect my ability to fall asleep. Could put so much pressure on myself beforehand to do it, but I still did it, and that was a surprise to me. That was a big surprise to me. And then I was worried about how well I'd sleep at my sister's. The first night, I think I probably got to sleep quicker in her spare bedroom than I did in my own bed. And this was with my 1-year-old nephew in the room next door, and there was all sorts of things that were just circling around in my head as to why I wasn't going to sleep, and I did both nights. Yeah, it wasn't perfect sleep, but the fact that I slept at all and I felt well enough to drive for like 4 hours the next day was an enormous surprise to me and a really positive one. And we've made plans to go and visit some of my partner's family who also live quite far away at the end of January, and that's there's a little bit of I hope I don't struggle to sleep that night, but the fear isn't I'm not going to sleep at all. That which was the fear about the previous trip.
Hmm.
It's just a sort of a little that could cause a bit of a struggle that night. So my fear has gone from I'm going to be awake all night, I will never sleep again ever in my life, to I might have a bit of a difficult start to the night, but I'm confident that I'll sleep.
Yeah.
So, and that's 2, 3 months of recovery. I would say I started recovering towards the end of October. And I had a little setback because I went back to work a bit too early. And then, yeah, I would say through November, December is when I've had my most recovery, to get to the stage that I'm at now. And I know I've got further I can go. And I know it's not going to be instantaneous, which is why I sort of say to myself, let's see how things are a year from now, rather than let's, see how I am in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Hmm.
I may well be completely back to normal in 2, 3, 4 weeks. I don't know. It's possible, but I'm not setting a time frame for it. I just know that at some point this will be something that was in the past, and that's something to look forward to. But there's no set time scale for it because the sleep that I'm having already is fine. I feel perfectly okay during the day. I can do whatever I want to do. I'm not feeling so scared and so tired that, the idea of getting behind the wheel of my car makes me think I'm a danger to anybody. That's been gone for months. Um, and I can do my job safely again, which is nice. The people I work for have trusted me to come back and do that. And I have to make some pretty, you know, impactful decisions in my job that do affect the lives of other people. And yeah, that wasn't something I could do when I was sick. So it's nice that I don't feel that there's anything I can't do. My life does feel back to normal now. And if anything, the only thing that's stopping me from having exactly the same life before is just my own worry about it, my own sort of fear of, oh, if I do X, then I might have a relapse. Um, that's the only thing that's holding me back. And I keep proving to myself with these little surprises of it doesn't matter what plans you make the next day, you end up sleeping anyway. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a good process to sort of follow, and who knows where I'll be in a year from now.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's a really the whole thing is inherently a process. I mean, even if I were to give you, let's say we met on the very first meeting and I articulated insomnia and the correct way to approach it perfectly. Like you just downloaded all that information. I was the perfect teacher, and you had a crystal clear understanding of insomnia. You knew it inside and out, front to back, and all that good stuff. Even if that was the case, it would you would just need more time doing it.
Yes.
That's one part of the equation. The other part is you just need more time because it's not even time, it's more experience going through life, going through these sort of things and accumulating more and more and more of those little surprises that you mentioned. And you
Mm.
realize it's like, man, I've exposed myself to a lot of different situations in the past few weeks or months. I started going back to work. I had workers come over to work on the house. I went and traveled. I went through the holiday. I went through the holidays. Had this medical test come up, and maybe sometimes it wasn't the best sleep, but it's in general it's getting way 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 better than I thought it could ever be.
Mm.
And you relatively quickly brought yourself to a point where maybe your sleep isn't 10 out of 10, but it's way more bearable than it
Oh
used.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. I mean, as somebody for I'm although I'm not at the year mark of, I know you brought up a few times like I wonder what I'm going to be like a year from now. Uh,
Mm.
I'm almost at that point. I'm at the 9 or 10 month mark, and I'm more or less sleep exactly how I slept prior to having insomnia, and that's been the case for a minute. But the
Mm.
biggest issue isn't necessarily the biggest cause for my success. The biggest indicator for success is not how much I'm sleeping, which sounds strange. You would think it would come down to that, but it's more so my general attitude towards
Mm.
having a setback. Full disclosure, I had my first setback that I had in like 4 months a few days ago. I had 2 nights of no sleep, and it happened for a few different reasons. It happened because I wasn't sleeping in my own bed. I was dealing with some stress from the holiday season, but the biggest
Yeah.
issue was by far that I come down with the flu. So I had a lot of different reasons, and um, although I didn't sleep for 2 days, what was very interesting to me was I didn't feel bad at all. And I know that, a big part of that effect is due to the fact that, I've told you that when you're approaching nights in these gentler ways, you're going to feel better because you're spending 7 hours resting as opposed to 7 hours of tossing and turning and trying to force sleep to
Panicking and overthinking it. Yeah, all of that. Yeah.
exactly. But even taking that effect into consideration, I was shocked at how good I felt. And not only did I feel really good, but I had zero concern that I was going to go back and fall back and regress to a deep period of insomnia. That fear just was not there for me at all.
Yeah.
And I think that once you've accumulated as much success as, not even as much as I've had, but as much as you've had, where you now
Mm.
know that like, okay, like you've proven to yourself that you can sleep consistently and well enough for several months. You know
Yes.
that there's nothing wrong with your body. You know that there's nothing broken with your psychology or your body chemistry. You've inherently proven to yourself, and that's
Mm.
something that what could your insomnia anxiety possibly tell you to yourself? It's like, no, you've already done it. It's like you've already proved it
Yeah.
wrong a million times over, you know?
Yeah, the doubt is gone.
Yeah.
When I was at my worst, it was a strong belief that I could not get better and that my life was ruined and that it wasn't worth living anymore. I know that that is just temporary now. That people would tell me, "Oh, it's just a phase. You will get better. There's nothing wrong with you." You hear that, and that's all very well and good, but you don't necessarily believe it because if that was true, why am I not sleeping tonight? And that's a very difficult thing to understand is, well, if my brain isn't broken, why can't I just sleep tonight? I don't know why you can't do that. And that's still something that is, quite cruel about insomnia is that you have to go through this process of calming yourself down. It's not like, oh, I'll just go have a bubble bath and then I'll be fine tonight. It doesn't sadly work like
Only
that.
are that easy to.
Um, Yeah. I think it's just maybe your body has to just sort of slowly turn down this dial of this
Hmm.
cocktail of adrenaline, cortisol, fear, overthinking, anxiety. It's just your your body is in this fight or flight response, and that's not something it just turns off and it's like, yeah, okay, great, now you can sleep.
Yeah.
Um, it takes time, and the best way of letting it happen is to just try and remind yourself, yeah, this is awful, this is rubbish, but it is temporary. And then when you start getting into that mindset of actually believing that it's temporary, and it may take, a couple of little surprises for yourself. It might just be one night where you think, oh, last night wasn't as bad as the night before. And then the next night, oh, that wasn't as bad as the night before that either. And just it slowly, slowly builds up. And then you realize, okay, sleep is coming back, even if it's slow, even if it's broken, even if I can't tell at the moment that it's happening. Eventually, you do get that feeling back of waking up in the morning and being like, yeah, I have no doubt that I've been asleep for however many hours. I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly how many times I wake up in the night anymore because I don't keep track of it anymore. I am aware that
Hmm.
I haven't, gone to bed and woken up and it's 8 a.m. That hasn't happened yet. But the more I think about that, the more I wonder whether that even happened to me before I got sick, because it's just not something I paid attention to.
Right.
Um, and so I'm paying attention to it less and less, and maybe I'm just thinking like, maybe that actually was normal for me. Maybe I am just the sort of person that naturally sleeps in two cycles. Like a period of 4 hours, get up, need a drink, use the bathroom, whatever. And then sleep for 3 or 4 more hours. Maybe that is just me, and I never knew because I never thought about it before. Um, but yeah, it's just something that your body, it's almost like the learning to sleep again, like it resets itself somehow.
Hmm.
But it's a slow process of
Yeah.
rebuilding that. And that is frustrating, and it's a very cruel illness to make you go through that. But I guess in the same way of when I was at my worst, I used to say, God, I wish I'd broken my leg, or broken my arm or whatever. I wish I'd done something physical. Why have I got this horrible, horrible illness? Why couldn't it have been something that you can just heal from? Well, you can, but in the same way that having a broken arm or a broken leg doesn't heal instantly, it takes time. And insomnia, as much as I would hated it and would have rather have had a broken arm or a leg, it heals itself in the same way. It's a
Hmm.
slow process, and you have to just give it time.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. It just it is the way that it is.
Yeah. It just is. And yeah, I think that for you, I remember this speaking to progress. I think that the biggest I think it might be the biggest turning point or the biggest milestone for overcoming insomnia for good is overcoming that first speed bump. Um,
Yes.
and I remember one time we had a meeting where you were in a really rough shape. It was your first big
Yeah.
relapse, and this is a completely night and day difference, Charlie, than what the Charlie that I'm talking to right now. You're just do you want to speak to that meeting or how that
Yeah,
was?
yeah, I'm happy to say that that was my lowest point. I actually felt worse at my first speed bump than I did probably as when I was first sick. I felt rather than sort of having this confidence of, oh, I can get over it again, because I hadn't recovered as much as I have now when I had that first speed bump.
Yeah.
This is what I was talking about when I said I think maybe I was discharged from the hospital a bit too quick. I think I went back to work a bit too quick. I'd only been sleeping without medication, and I say sleeping, I not as good as I am now, still broken, but the
Right.
paradoxical thing had started to go. I started to believe I was sleeping, but it was still very light and very broken. Um, waking up many, many times during the night. And I thought, okay, well, at least I'm sleeping. This is fine. And I got discharged from the hospital. I decided after a week, yeah, let's go back to work, because I knew that that was something that was bothering me. I knew it was something that was a challenge, and I needed to to just get on with it in my
Right.
head. It was like, no, that's fine. I've got to get on with it at some point. I need to do it. And I think that became my sort of way of dealing with this was let's just do everything all at once because I've got to get it over with, rip that band-aid off and just get back to a normal life. I rushed it, I think. Um, and unsurprisingly, I struggled. I had a really difficult night the night before I went back to work. I got some sleep, which was still a bit of a win, still a little success, but it wasn't good at all. I went back to work. Work was very difficult. I did manage to get better sleep that night because of how tired I was, but the night afterwards, again, difficult sleep, and then the night after that, also difficult sleep. One night where I think I had just been tossing and turning all night. Yes, there was probably some paradoxical sleep of 20, 30 minutes here and there, but no sort of perception of, okay, yeah, it took me a while, maybe it was 2, 3, 4 a.m., but then at least I slept till 7. No, none of that. It felt like I was back, um, you know, to where I was. And that made me extremely scared, extremely unhappy. And yeah, that was when I started having some serious thoughts about, can I live like this? And do I want to live like this? And I ended up back in the hospital because of those thoughts. And I remember during that time, I tried taking the promethazine again. It didn't work. And that I think I'd been holding on to the thought of, well, if I ever really struggle, I can take this drug again and it'll make me sleepy and I'll fall asleep. And it didn't work.
Mhm.
It did not make me go to sleep. And I think that it was just sort of like that was my crutch. And it felt like someone had just pulled it out in front of
Mhm.
me and I was falling and just I was in a really bad place. My partner was very worried about me. Not so much the not sleeping, but the mental state that I was in because of how badly I was dealing with that little relapse. Um, and I couldn't handle it because I just sort of thought all the progress I've made, it was for nothing. I didn't stop to think, well, I got over it before, I can get over it again. That thought wasn't there. I was just so upset by the fact that I'd had the problem come back because I was terrified of it.
Yeah.
And that made the problem worse. And then I ended up being signed off work again for a while, um, back at the hospital for a few more weeks. And yeah, again, as an outpatient, I never had to stay inside, but having to go there every day or two it feels like you live there when you're there as often as you are.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, wasn't fun at all.
Yeah.
But I I think that period of really struggling with sleep, it only lasted about a week, whereas the other times had lasted, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, when I was at my worst before you and I started working together. Um, and I think the next week I spoke to you, I was a lot brighter, a lot happier, wasn't I? So there was only
Sure.
one time you saw me at my absolute rock bottom.
Hmm.
Um, and then the week afterwards, I think I'd had a good night's sleep the night before, so I was in a lot better mood.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, even my absolute worst relapse throughout all of this lasted less than a week.
Hmm.
So that
It,
was good.
yeah. The reason why I wanted to get your experience with that is because overcoming that first speed bump, I think, is so, or the first few speed bumps is so
Mm,
um, crucial because it's a very scary moment because you're trying out this new approach to insomnia. You're seeing success. You feel better, and then suddenly it fails, and just like, oh God, no, why? Why is this my? I knew it. It's all fucking bullshit. This isn't gonna work. I don't know what other safety net I have. Um,
yeah.
I was working with a woman who whose story is very similar to yours in that she was starting to see quite a bit of success. She was doing okay, and she was like cautiously optimistic in the same way that you were. And then she had her first speed bump, and she was in a state that was very similar to the state that you were in when we had that meeting, and you were very scared and uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
and then the next time I met with her, which was just not even a few days later, she's like, okay, yeah, I'm fine. I'm feeling better.
Yeah,
Which,
it's amazing what a good night's sleep does. It just
yeah,
changes your whole mood. Yeah.
but it's just amazing how it's really important to address how much full of shit the insomnia anxiety is, because as horrifying and as real as those fears are when you're having that speed bump, it doesn't mean anything.
No, no. It is temporary, and from what I've found in my experience, a sleepy brain will try to play tricks on you. It will
Hmm.
make you more upset than you need to be. It will make you think the worst things that you could think. A tired brain is not your friend. It doesn't like
Hmm.
you. It says things that are just not true. And you just have to sort of realize, yeah, you're just tired, and you will sleep, and you'll feel so much better after you've had that sleep. So if you are like I was, where you are sort of having thoughts about whether you really want to carry on with the sort of life that you've got, I'm really glad that I never had any plans to act on those thoughts, but I'm really glad I never got worse than that, because that was a stupid thing to think. It really was, over something as daft as being tired, because that's really what it is. It's just that I was tired.
Hmm.
Um, and you don't have your best thoughts when you're tired. You don't. And, other than the difficulty I was having with sleep and work being stressful, that was the worst thing in my life. There wasn't anything worse than that. I didn't have any financial troubles. Thankfully, it turned out I wasn't having any health troubles after all. There was a lot of reasons for me to not be thinking that way, but all of that was just completely overridden by the fact that it's like I can't sleep. I've gone back to having insomnia. I'll never get over it. I'll never be cured. I was right all along. It's incurable, and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, and those sort of thoughts only lasted a week, and then I don't know what happened, but I just had one night where, oh, okay, I'm sleeping better again. And that just gave me the confidence to sort of be like, oh, yeah, yeah, it is temporary, isn't it? Yeah.
Hmm. Isn't
So,
it so stupid in hindsight looking back at it?
yeah,
Like just all the silly anxieties that come up and stuff. You're just like, now that you're in this better, well-rested, more peaceful state, looking back and you're just like, "Man, what the fuck was I thinking?" You know, you know?
yeah, I do think that way. I
Yeah.
mean, I have said to my partner so many times, like, I don't know how you put up with me, like,
Mm.
during that period, because of the stupid things I was thinking and saying and doing that was just perpetuating the problem. Yeah, I couldn't. If I wanted to have dealt with it worse, I don't know how I could have. I think I dealt with it like at the start. It was just like, if you opened a book of how to ruin your sleep, everything I did would be in there, from like listed 1 to 10. It's just, yeah. That there are things that you can do to make yourself better, and that will take time. There are things that you can do to make yourself worse that don't take any time at all. Like they will instantly just make you worse. So it's unfortunate that it is that way. But yeah, it's just daft, like I don't know why I reacted to it as bad as I did, other than being sleepy makes you make bad choices, I think. It makes you more worried than you need to be. And the only way that that's going to stop is that you just have to sort of remind yourself that this is just sleep. It's not like water. It's not like oxygen. You're not going to die instantaneously just because you haven't had enough sleep. You can, unfortunately, I have learned in my experience, you can survive for a long time without sleep. You won't enjoy it, but you will.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that your body will not let you um, get to a point where your health is seriously at risk. The paradoxical insomnia, I think that's why that exists. I think when your body gets so unbelievably exhausted, your mind's still going 110 miles an hour. It's not calming down. It's not letting you rest, but your brain is making you sleep anyway, even while your brain is going that quickly. And that's why you don't notice that you're asleep. But obviously, none of this is medical. I'm
Of
not
course.
medically trained. I have no idea. But that's how I like to think about it, is that I couldn't tell I was sleeping because I was too scared. I was overthinking it all, and yet my brain slept anyway.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I didn't notice it, but it knew what it was doing, and it was keeping me safe. Whether I was making bad decisions about sleep or not, it was still sleeping.
Yeah.
Um, against all the odds, I was still sleeping, and I think that just sort of goes to show that it it's just not possible to constantly be awake, even if you think you are. It doesn't. It just doesn't work that way. It's just it's not the sort of sleep that you want, and that in itself is distressing enough. That's fair. But the more you go from I'm not sleeping to I'm not sleeping well to I'm starting to sleep better to I'm sleeping well.
Mm.
That's it sort of goes from that spectrum when you start realizing that actually this is just going to bed and going to sleep, and it's something that I had been doing for 35 years
Yeah.
without a problem, and then for some reason 4 months ago I couldn't do it properly anymore. Um, and 4 years, sorry, 4 months versus 35 years, it was a very short period of time in hindsight, and I wish I'd dealt with it better because it probably wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. If I'd known how to deal with it properly instead of panicking and making it worse in my head. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't think I'll ever go back to that again. I certainly don't ever think I'll be running off to the emergency room and saying, I can't sleep, what should I do? And them pumping me full of sleeping medication. I don't think that'll ever happen again, which
Yeah.
is good because that was the worst. That was the scariest part. The very first night, and then the second time when I had the speed bump,
Yeah.
they were the worst. They were the worst nights. Absolutely, they were the worst nights. And I don't think either of those will ever apply again because even as I say, nights now when I go to bed, like Christmas Eve, and the day before I went back to work the second time, yeah, struggle to sleep. I'm not going to say I had a perfect night's sleep those nights because I didn't. They were challenges. They were things that I were worried about as being potential speed bump triggers, relapse triggers. Um, but yeah, while it may have taken me a couple of hours to get to sleep on the night before work, and I think it took about an hour to get to sleep on Christmas Eve, I still slept, you
Yeah.
know. And that's what I need to remind myself about this next road trip we've got coming up at the end of January when we go down to visit my partner's family in the south of England. Um, I should sleep. It may be difficult. It may be that when I'm lying there, I get those thoughts of, oh, I really hope I don't mess this up by not sleeping. Um, and then I believe I'll fall asleep anyway, because that just seems to be how it happens with me at that moment. I have nights that are difficult at the start, but they still seem to result in identifiable, decent sleep, just not as good as I would like it to be.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that I'm doing that to myself with the anxiety. I think that's the bit that's annoying about all of this is that if I just stopped thinking that way, well, then why shouldn't I sleep perfectly again? But again, it's that I have to give it time. I have to have these little surprises to build up that sleep confidence, and then yeah, eventually I probably will be able to plan a road trip or plan something important, and the idea of not being able to sleep won't even cross my mind. It won't be there. Um, but I'm not there yet, and that's just something that I have to accept. And at least I've made peace with that, I suppose. That I may have times in the future where sleep isn't as ideal as I would like it to be, but that's not going to turn into 4 days of me being awake and being given all sorts of scary medication. That's gone. So, you know, that's that's as much as I can expect really at the period that I'm in for now. And fingers crossed, a year from now, it'll be even better.
Yeah. There's no way it would be hard for me to I would be shocked if it wasn't better. I certainly don't think it's going to regress. I think that that's another milestone is once you're pretty deep in recovery, you get a point, and I could tell from the way that you just explained how your current feelings on your whole situation. Once you get to a point where you look back and you tell yourself, I don't think that I would ever could ever relapse to that. Like it's almost hard for you to
Mm.
imagine like it just doesn't seem like it's possible, really. Because just
Yeah.
because you know too much, you know too much about the nature of the problem and how you react to it, and that seems like that's the feeling that you have, where you're just like, you're almost confused thinking about how it could possibly get back to that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I'm someone that suffers with anxiety generally. So the idea that I still sometimes have these thoughts of, oh, this might happen again, it's the same as sometimes I worry about whether I've locked my front door. That is just going to be something that I experience because of the way that I am with anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, but when I don't have to fear it anymore, for example, I don't worry about the sort of stuff I used to worry about when I was at uni, like, oh, I used to worry about losing my laptop and then all my notes, all my revision, go out the window and I'd fail my degree, that kind of thing. That fear went away because the thing that was causing that fear eventually stopped. I had too many seminars where I would never lose my laptop, and eventually that fear just dissipated.
Yeah.
And that's what will happen with this. Like at the moment, I have these fears about, oh, well, I might lose some sleep. Year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, however long it takes, eventually that won't be a source of anxiety for me because it will just stop happening, you
Yeah.
know. And then it won't be a recurring sort of, oh, maybe, Um, I am always going to be someone who struggles with anxiety. It's just who I am, that's part of me. But I do also know that what I'm anxious about can change, and I don't see any reason why this won't change.
Hmm. Well, Charlie, we're coming up a little bit more than an hour. I do have to head on out for the rest of the day, but I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, and more importantly, sharing your own your journey and your success. I think that'll be very helpful for a lot of people listening, and I think that what you have to say is would be very comforting to people who are in the same situation that you were in a few months ago. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do that. And I think it's good. A lot of people are going to get some value out of it.
You're very welcome. I mean, if I could go back to say one thing to myself from 4 months ago, it would be, it can get better. Don't spend all your time worrying about what's wrong with you, when it's going to start getting better. All of that will just prolong how bad you're feeling. And if you feel like, oh, I'm somehow different, I'm a special case. Maybe I have something that's, causing my behavior to be different to everybody else's. I don't think you do. And thinking like that isn't going to help you. What you need is things like, this video, people like John, I guess, people like me now,
Mm,
someone who can say to you, I have been through what you have, and it does get better. And that was the most important thing that John taught me because he is an example of how bad it can be and how much better it can be. And by talking to him and working with him, I've gone from someone who was in a really bad place to someone who is a lot better. It does happen. It does work. Um, and I wish anybody who's watching this all the best.
Thanks a lot, Charlie. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Everyone thinks that they're the special one, but turns out it's just another bullshit insomnia anxiety thing. It's not true.
Yeah.
So yeah, appreciate those closing words of wisdom, Charlie. And yeah, let me know if if you have any other questions pop up, or if there's anything else I can do to help you out with. But honestly, it sounds like you're already there.
Yeah. I feel like I'm back to myself again, which I didn't know was possible, but you showed me it was.
Great. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Charlie. And yeah, hope to hear from you soon. And take care. Have a happy New Year. And yeah,
Yeah, you too.
all right. See you, Charlie.
All right. Bye.